Sayiduna Umar Radi Allahu Anho was always feared by people. Everyone was scared of him. No one wanted to challenge Umar. He used to enter the arena of Uqaz as the biggest fighter, and he would come out of there as the champion. This individual, Umar bin al-Khattab, has heard there is a new religion on the block. The religion's name is Islam. The man who claims it is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he said, I've had enough of this. I've had enough. I'm going to end Islam. I'm going to kill him. Sayyidina Umar wanted to kill the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He set out, and his sword was in his hand. The purpose of the story I will tell at the end of it. Keep listening carefully. He took his sword out of his hand and he marched through the streets of Makkah. On the way there, he bumped into an individual. His name is Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Radi Allahu Anho. As Sa'ad was the first man to ever fire an arrow in Islam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the battle of Uhud, one by one, was handing over Sa'ad arrows. At the time of handing over these arrows, the Prophet ﷺ said, "O Sa'ad, may my mother Amina and my father Abdullah be sacrificed for you today." We say our mother and father be sacrificed for the Prophet. I will sacrifice my mother and father for the Prophet. But the Prophet said, "May my mother and father be sacrificed for Sa'ad." That's his maqam, that's what level he was on. Sa'ad bumped into Umar. Sa'ad seen Umar's kind of vexed off. "Where are you going, Umar?" "I'm going to end Islam, I've had enough. I'm going to kill Muhammad." Sayyidina Sa'ad was a Muslim, but he kept it a secret. At that time, Sayyidina Sa'ad said, "Umar, go home. Go to your sister's house, Fatima. Bad news, she's become a Muslim as well." Sayyidina Umar, you know, today if I said something about your sister, very sensitive spot in your body, your sister, everyone gets bound up. Sayyidina Umar felt it. "You're talking about my sister. My sister's on the deen." Sayyidina Umar said, "There's no point hitting Sa'ad." Went, knocked on the door of Sayyidah Fatima. This is not the daughter of the Prophet, Fatima bint al-Khattab. I said, "Open the door." She said, "Who is it?" I said, "Umar, open the door." At that time, they were learning the Quran. This is when Islam was at its earliest time, earliest. This is the first couple of days, the first month or two. "Open the door." So the Fatima opened the door. So Umar slammed it open. The person who was teaching him, his name was Khabbab. He was teaching him how to read the Quran. And at that time, Sayiduna Umar Radi Allahu Anho, I said, "What are you doing? Are you a Muslim?" She said, "Yes." Touched her, his own sister. She began to bleed, crying. Lots of question arised. Umar Radi Allahu Anho took her husband, Sa'id ibn Zayd, one of the 10 companions, beat him up, got very tired. Sayyidina Umar Radi Allahu Anho became very tired, and he seen his sister's face bleeding, and his heart began to melt. And he asked her a question. I said, "Oh my sister, what are you reading? What are you doing? What are you reading?" And she said, "I'm reading the Quran." He says, "Let me read the Quran with you." She said, "You have to be pure and clean." When he said, "Go and do wudu," he did wudu. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu opened the Quran. And the first verses he read was Surah Taha. Sayyidina Umar read the ayat of the Quran, Sayyidina Khabbab came up. And Sayyidina Umar says, "Take me to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let me go meet him." And they arrived there, knocked on the door. Sayyidina Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in the house of Sayyidina Arqam bin Arqam. This was the first madrasa, first institute in Islam. In Makkah Mukarramah, the house of Dar al-Arqam. Knocked on the door. "Who is it?" "Umar." "What do you want?" You know who was standing on the other side? Hamza, Asadullah. Sayyidina Hamza, a man who could, you know how Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather toe to toe. You know the great fight everyone's waiting for, Pacquiao versus Mayweather, toe to toe, best pound for pound boxers in the world. This was the greatest fight or duel that could ever be. Hamza going toe to toe with Umar. And it came. Everyone was anticipating. What do you want, Umar? Says, I've come to accept Islam. Sayyidina Hamza said, Umar, let me tell you one thing before I let you in. If you've come to accept Islam, welcome. But if you've come to do mischief, Umar, I will kill you with your own sword. Can you understand the maqam of Hamza? You know what his nickname was? Asadullah wa Asadur Rasul. The lion of Allah and the lion of Rasulullah. Who today can stand from us and say, I'm a lion for Islam. I want to be a lion for Islam. I want to defend my religion. I want to show the world we are followers of Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We're far, far away from that. Prior to this event, let me tell you a very beautiful thing. The Prophet ﷺ always used to make one dua. That dua was this: Oh Allah, guide one out of the two that you love the most. Umar ibn al-Khattab or Umar ibn Hasham. Abu Jahl, the enemy to Islam, or guide Umar ibn al-Khattab. And the words were, whoever you love Allah, you bring to Islam. Do you understand what I'm saying? You didn't understand. Oh Allah, whoever you love, you bring him to Islam. Who did Allah love? Umar. Even before he was a Muslim, Allah loved Umar. Allah always loved Umar Radi Allahu Anho. Why? Because he had courage. He was not a coward like me and you. He was a man. When he accepted Islam, the Prophet ﷺ 3 times tapped him on his chest and said, Oh Allah, you know this hatred he has for Islam, substitute it with Iman. And as Umar said to the Prophet ﷺ, you know the first 40 Muslims, he was the 40th Muslim. They were all weak people, shepherds. The only big timer you can say was Abu Bakr and Uthman. The rest were young lads, 18, 19-year-olds, fresh on the deen. There were slaves, Bilal al-Habshi, Maqam of Hazrat Bilal, a black slave. How we are so racist today. Yet the man who the Prophet appointed as his muazzin, the man who was the king of that time was Bilal. The one who the Prophet ﷺ said, Oh Bilal, stand on the Kaaba and do the adhan. Abu Bakr is not going to stand there, you have been selected to stand there. The Prophet ﷺ didn't say, you're black and he's white. You're a non-Arab and he's an Arab. The Prophet ﷺ respected everyone. He taught them a very, very important lesson, that there is no difference between me and you, except in good deeds. He taught the Sahaba this lesson. Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu anhu, Abdullah bin Mas'ud. You know, if you knew who Abdullah bin Mas'ud was, the Sahaba used to mock him because his legs used to be very small. They used to laugh at him because he had skinny legs. He was a shepherd all day. You know who he is? He's the faqih of this ummah. When you want to understand fiqh, you go to Abdullah bin Mas'ud to understand. When the Sahaba used to mock him, the Prophet ﷺ turned to the Sahaba and said, Oh my companions, let me tell you something. On the day of judgment, when we will all stand in front of Allah, if we was to put the legs of Abdullah bin Mas'ud on one side of the scale, and we was to put the Mount Uhud on the other side of the scale, the legs of Abdullah bin Mas'ud will outweigh the mountain of Uhud. This is how much power he has. He was sitting there at that time when the Prophet opened the door, Hamza opened the door. The Prophet ﷺ, when Hazrat Umar became Muslim, he said to the Prophet ﷺ, Ya Rasulullah, there is no need to hide anymore. You go read your namaz at the Kaaba, and I will be your bodyguard. When he came to migrating to Medina, everyone migrated to Medina in secret, undercover. When Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu went, he went to the Kaaba. He did tawaf around the Kaaba 7 times, he did 7 circuits. He took off his bow, he took his arrow, and he threw it to the leaders. And he says, go on, Who's going to stop me from going to Medina? I'm going openly. Not one of them stood up to question Umar bin al-Khattab. Why? Because he had courage. Why? Because he had iman that was inside him. Why? Because he accepted Islam entirely with his heart. He wasn't someone who uttered it with his mouth, I am a Muslim. On the battle of Uhud, Umar stood next to the Prophet ﷺ. Nothing ever distracted Umar